can start in a couple of minutes. So, problem solved. Good morning. Nice to see you, so many people here presential. Although the pandemic restrictions and even the weather conditions here in Brussels, some of the people who were attending this meeting presential moved to the online. So we have around 25 people presential and about 70 people, representatives of regions, online. Very, very shortly, welcome everyone to this event, both the ones who are present, you are present here, and those who were following the event online. The first session, if you remember, the first session of the regions for EU recovery took place when the recovery plans were just presented. And now we are going to talk about them at the time they are being implemented. We have here today interesting contributions for regional representatives and also from a member of the Commission. But now let me please introduce to you our Minister for Foreign Affairs and Open Government, Mrs. Victoria Alsina. Please, Minister, take the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here with us. I think that we need to get used more and more to this kind of events where we have part of the audience that is physically here and part of the audience connecting online. It's really a pleasure to be here. For us, Brussels and what happens here is the key piece of our foreign action. And it's always a pleasure to come. It's always a pleasure to know you and strengthen the relationships and also to support the great work that the delegation is doing since the very beginning. So I should say that it's really a pleasure to have all of you here and to have all of you as part of a conversation that it has been important, but it will be even more important in the forthcoming months. And as the delegate said, now we can really to start seeing the consequences of the current government and governance model that we have. And it's an important moment during this second joint event that we have as part of these leaders of the regions for EU recovery. It's very important that we talk more deeply and we exchange opinions about the challenges and the opportunities that implementing these funds with the current model generates. So this is a space in which we will love considering that we are all facing similar situations and we are facing similar challenges, that we can all take a moment and put together some thoughts on what we think it will determine how these funds work and the benefit and the impact that that may have in the near future. You know that Catalonia has a long tradition as a European player. We always wanted and we want to be part of this European integration, and we want to provoke the right debates in the right moments, because we are, and when I say we, I think I'm not talking also in name of the government, but also in name of the civil society in Catalonia. We are very much Europhiles, but because of that, we are also very viewer engagement. And I think that we already have seen some results of the actions and the common efforts that we put together as part of this voluntary network of cooperation. COVID-19, I think we can say that it was a multifactorial crisis, so many crises together that came after COVID. And at the end of the day, we can all agree that an important one has been an economic and social collapse in a lot of dimensions, right? And here, I think that the European Union had two possible reactions, and they took the right one, right? Understanding the pandemic as a crucial opportunity to really rethink where we are and where we need to be, and how these social economic transformations need to shape in the forthcoming decade. So I think that, like the EU leaders declared in the European Council conclusions of July 2022, if the COVID-19 crisis presented to Europe with a challenge of historic proportions, it should also require an unprecedented effort to recover from it. And here we are. This unprecedented effort is these next generation funds. That is the largest, as you know, stimulus package that we ever had. More than 800 billion of loans and grants that will need to be distributed with a clear setup of priorities, and also with a clear path forward about how to make this happen. So I think that I read someplace and I took a note, because I like that we are living a kind of Hamiltonian moment, as some commentators and experts state in reference to the first United States Secretary of Treasury, that once said Hamilton that the crucial role that the Federation had in assuming individual states' debt with the US federal debt, right? And I think that the approach and the philosophy that the European Union take at this moment, it was connected at some point to this. But let's jump about how these funds work and how they should work, right? How they are planned to work, and how these may have some opportunities to improve in the benefit of all of us, in the benefit of our regions, but also in the benefit of all administrations that have competences around and following the subsidiarity principle are used to manage more directly these public policies and these decisions, right? Because, as you know, the centerpiece of these funds, of these recovery and resilience funds, is that how it works now is to subsidize the member state recovery, but organizing and lining up the priorities, working together with the member states. And this is how it works now, right? So, in other words, regular payment depends on the ability of the member states to fulfill what we call the twin green and digital transitions. And the member states are the ones in charge to really plan what needs to happen in these two fronts and how one front can benefit from the other. So we already know, and we don't need to stop about how this works now. The question that we want to discuss today is precisely what about the regions, which can be the role of the regions, and how should we make this happen, right? We all know that all through the crucial to drive change and reforms that regions have the capacity to do in this twin transition competence, we are notably sidelined in this process. So we don't have a direct voice to really put priorities in these plans that the member states moved forward, and we don't have the voice we want. So I think that this is why this Regions for EU Recovery Network has its own value, grouping, and I think we need to remember that we group 30 regions from 10 different member states with the main objective of strengthening the role of the regions. We did already some things since this network was created. So we have 3 working groups that are working in different pieces of this conversation. We also did a joint letter to the leaders of the European institutions demanding to have a stronger voice in different things, in the debates that are happening around these recovery funds, also in the decision-making processes that take place. And finally, and the most important thing in this case, the more operational piece, the design of these national recovery plans. This past October, in the preliminary meeting that the head of the delegation mentioned before, we had a first opportunity to talk about the main challenges. And now that we are in another stage of this, I think that it's the moment to do to start doing a comparative analysis about how these things are working and how can we help also one to each other and how can we raise our voice more effectively in this space. I think that this is a legitimate demand and it deserves this conversation and much more that will come. Nothing to say or nothing to add, especially in the room, about the key role that administrations that have direct competence on topics have, having the right information and knowing the right network of stakeholders and connecting with citizens about the topics that we have been implementing and leading for decades or even more than decades in the past, right? I think that the closest connections with citizens is meaningful, and also this has a direct effect on the first-hand knowledge that regions have, and also as a consequence in the role that we should play. I think that it's also about efficiency, so it's not only about the competence and the information and the connections, it's also about the efficiency and the capacity to be really innovative without leaving on the side an important need that we know we have in our territories. So I think that holding the majority of the competences, it brings us to the point in which we are the level of the administration that can more effectively speed up the absorption of these investments, to speed up also the transformations that need to come with these investments, and also to align them with real needs, because there is also a trade-off as part of the recovery from the pandemic in which you need to think about the future, but you also have the current needs, right? And it's necessary to connect both. We cannot be one or the other. We need to do both. If not, we will be missing something. So I think that this core management and implementation is something that we are best prepared to do, and we should raise our voices in order to share that as part of the debate that is going on. I think that in Spain we have an illustrative example, and here allow me to focus on the case that I know more closely, right? On Spain, the National Recovery and Resilience Plan contains almost 350 pages outlining the main plans and the reforms and the final impact that Spain is waiting from that. But we didn't have the right dialogue to be part of this conversation and to help to define not only the objectives, but also the path forward in terms of how we should implement that. It's deciding on what we want to invest, and after is really doing that effectively. So it's these two different levels of the conversation. I think that there are some results of the State of the Union survey that are relevant to share with you, because I think are pretty symptomatic of what we are living nowadays. This data came from September 2022, so close from where we are now. And they show a couple of numbers that are key that I wanted to share with you. So 77% of the respondents believe that regional governments should be consulted when next generation EU funds are spent. Not bad, 77%. But 85 of them agree that there must be transparency and effective control from the funds, also from the regional perspective, right? So I think that these are key numbers that we need to have them in mind. And here what I want to say is that the consensus in that front helps us to move forward this conversation. And I also think that this huge investment that the EU institutions are doing is directly connected to how the, let's say, legitimacy that the institutions have and the integrations, or how citizens will see the integration in the forthcoming years. So it has a direct influence in these two things, right? In integration, in legitimacy, and in the vision that citizens will have. European elections of 2024 are getting closer and expectations are higher than ever, considering that the challenge is also higher than ever. And in this context, I think that the influence of the recovery funds will go beyond 2026. This is a long-lasting implications initiative. The next generations will need to pay or to repay for this investment, and they will remember very well how this money and this opportunity were used in these days. So in conclusion, to make a long story short, I think that the next generation funds are an excellent opportunity that represent what we all want that the European Union should be, but at the same time, the credibility of the funds, the credibility of the EU institutions themselves, and the success that this will have at the end of the day will directly depend on whether the regions are allowed or not to become part of the driving force that move forward these funds and these investments. I think that we should recover this Europe of the regions idea. And I want to say not only regions, all administrations that have competences. And in this case, I think that decision-making will be much better for all of us, not only for our regions, but also for Europe, if we are part and we can have a strong voice as part of this. Thank you so much. And I'm very much looking forward to the debate and the fruitful conversation that I'm sure we will have. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Consejera. Thank you, Minister. I've written the phrase, we want to provoke the right debate in the right moment. That's exactly what we want to do today and the coming days and years, always. Now, let me say how this session will be developed. First, we'll have the keynote speaker. And after that, the roundtable. Keynote speaker will be talking about the state of play on the implementation of the NGEU and will be Mr. Declan Costello, Deputy Director General of Economic and Financial Affairs, ECFIN, European Commission. And after that, we have the roundtable on the experience of regions in the implementation of the new generations European Union from Flanders, Axel Boyce, the representative of Flanders to the EU. After that, Lower Austria with Martin Eichtinger. Then South Tyrol with Marta Gerber. And finally, Catalonia with Matilda Villarreal, who is the Secretary of Economic Affairs and European Funds. The three online and Axel Boyce here with you. So now we have the keynote speaker. Please, Declan Costello, you can take the floor.
So good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me? I take it that's a yes. Okay, so first of all, I would really like to thank the regions for the EU recovery for inviting me to make the keynote address. It's indeed a great honor, but also, of course, a great opportunity to address 30 regions from 10 member states, which will be absolutely front and center at the delivery and implementation of the next generation EU policies. And in particular, what I would like to focus on today, the implementation of the Recovery and Resilience Facility. Now, I have a PowerPoint slide, which is going up. If we could move to the next slide. So here, what I would like to do with the presentation today is a number of things. First, I'd just like to briefly update you on what is the state of play with the plans. How do we assess what we have received so far? I would then like to turn to the role of the regions and how the European Commission sees this. And then I would like to focus on a number of critical factors which we think are important when it comes to implementation, specifically from the perspective of the Commission. So let me turn to the state of play. Now, I think in your previous meeting, my colleague Celine Gower addressed you in March of this year. And at that stage, we were very much focused on the design of the recovery and resilience plans. Right now, the start of December 2021, we're very, very much in the implementation phase. So 26 member states have formally submitted their recovery plans to the Commission. We have approved 22 of those, and the Council has indeed adopted all of those 22. We have issued the pre-financing, so that's 13% of the amount requested upfront, already has been paid out, amounting to 52.3 billion euros. And in terms, we're now into the assessment of payment requests. In fact, my slide is already out of date. We have two payment requests. We have one payment request from Spain, which we are very close to finalizing our assessment, perhaps even in the course of this week. And we have received a second payment request from France, and we will be assessing that in the weeks to come. So we really are now into the implementation phase. If I could move to the next slide. So what you see here is a very, very quick summary of the actual content of the 22 recovery and resilience plans which have been approved by the Council today. Now, obviously, I can't do justice to their content. What I can tell you is if you aggregate up the numbers on the screen, there are over just slightly more than 1,000 reform measures included in these 22 plans. There are over 2,327 investment measures, and the total amount which is being committed for these 22 plans amounts to 450 billion euros. Now, this is a very, very significant amount of money which is being committed. It really is testament to the solidarity of European Union member states, but I think also to the collective efforts of the Commission, the Council, member states, regions, to really make this an instrument which can, genuinely contribute to the recovery of our member states, not several years from now, but in the midst of the ongoing pandemic. And I think we see already, we see it today that, this pandemic is still with us, and it continues to have consequences for our economy. You've got a breakdown here of the four key areas. I won't go through these. What we do see is, though, on the basis of the 22 plans, we have surpassed the target of 37% of funding to be attributed towards climate change, and more than 20% for the digital transition. So in terms of the actual content of the plan, I think it really does, the Commission is more than satisfied with what we have seen so far. If we could go to the next slide, okay? And this is just to illustrate how the, what are the not only the potential economic impact of the plans, but also that it's making a real impact right now and next year. Now, the left-hand slide shows some model simulations which the Commission had undertaken when we proposed the facility itself. Now, we estimated that the direct impact of the RRF and next generation funding on GDP would be somewhere between 0.7 and 1.2% of GDP each year up to 2026. Okay, so quite a significant impact. However, this is likely to be a substantial underestimate of the economic impact of these fundings, because what we have estimated is only the direct impact of the additional investment spending. What we have not included in these estimates is the potential impact of the reforms which are included in the Recovery and Resilience Plan. And the potential impact of these reforms, which are very, very many, is quite large. Now, what we've done is some sort of stylized estimates, like what would be the impact on GDP if member states undertook structural reforms so that they moved towards the best practices we see in other member states. And actually what we come up with is that GDP could be 11 percentage points higher over 20 years if all member states were to do that. So it's a very, very significant potential impact, which is not included in these figures, okay? And those estimates would be even higher in our member states and our regions, which are lagging behind best practice. So for example, instead of 11%, which is the EU average, the potential gains would be somewhere in the region of 16 to 18% of GDP in countries like Italy. The second point I want to stress here is what you see in the red line is it actually tried to look at what is the actual benefit of having an instrument like the Recovery and Resilience Facility, which is a common instrument. So we collectively together support investment and try to make the green and digital transition. And what we see is that the economic impact is much, much higher through collective action. That's the blue line, okay? In fact, it's 1/3 higher compared to pursuing these reforms on these actions on an individual basis. The right-hand slide, okay, actually says, well, what's happening right now? Okay, what's actually happening right now? What you're seeing is the amount of spending attributed or attached to the Recovery Resilience Facility grants that member states have reported to us, which they are doing this year, and what they plan to do next year in their budgets, okay? Now, this slide only concerns the Euro area countries, but what we see is that there are very, very substantial amounts of money being committed. Overall, already we see that about, you know, the Recovery Resilience Facility is contributing at the level of the Euro area about 0.5 percentage point of GDP on average, both this year and next year. But those figures are substantially higher in some of the largest net beneficiary countries you see on the slide, for example, Italy and Greece, where the amounts are substantially higher. If I could turn to the next slide. And then this is to, of course, to say some comments about the involvement of regions. Now, clearly, the regional authorities have an absolutely critical and vital role to play in the recovery process, and also, of course, in the implementation of the Recovery and Resilience Facility. Now, we know that regions account for about 50% of all public investment across the EU. So it is right, and it's essential, of course, that your involvement in this, you know, is foreseen for. Now, the regulation, you know, of the RRF foresees two things. One, it obliges member states to undertake, you know, to provide a dedicated description of the consultation process that they have undertaken in the design of plan with local regional authorities, social partners, and other relevant stakeholders. So it is a clear requirement, you know, it's a clear push on our side, but also a requirement to report back on that. The plans are also required to show how the measures, the reforms, investments which are put forward will contribute to cohesion, taking into account local, regional, and national disparities. Okay. Now, I think we are perfectly aware, and you know, we heard it also from the minister just now, that this process of consultation has not been perfect, and indeed it has been a bit variable across member states. I can assure you it's okay. The European Commission throughout the adoption process has been absolutely exhorting member states to engage in as wide and as open consultations as appropriate. What I would, however, say is clearly this facility has been developed during a period of crisis. And in fact, there's an inherent tension, if you will, in the design of the plan, because it's aiming to both contribute to the recovery, which means we move quickly, at the same time as resilience, so bringing about lasting and transformational change. In an ideal world, of course, one would have taken a bit more time to design these reforms and investments, to consult social partners, to involve the regions in a more structured process. But it is equally critical for the recovery of our economies that we have been able to move quickly, get the plans agreed, start the implementation, and ensure that the funds are injected into our economies this year, next year, the year after next, precisely when our economies, our workforces are at their most vulnerable. That's not an excuse or not trying to, but it is been an extreme challenge, I think, for the Commission, but for all member states to the design of these plans has been very challenging. Now, here, however, we turn to the implementation phase, because it's critical, of course, that the plans also, and that the regulation also foresees the involvement of regions and regional and local authorities in the implementation of the plans. And as I said, in a sense, it cannot be, it could not be otherwise, given the central role which regional authorities play in public investment. Now, the plans themselves, they vary, of course, in terms of the degree of involvement, but we do see one very, very significant investments in member states which are to be channeled, or the implementing authority is indeed the regional or local authority. And we have also been working with the member states in looking at the governance frameworks they're putting in place to implement these plans, again, pressing as much as we can to ensure proper consultation and proper dialogue processes for the regional authorities. That being said, it is, of course, ultimately the responsibility of the member state or the central authority to put in place these structures. But again, I can assure you that the Commission is doing its absolute utmost to ensure proper consultation and involvement of regional authorities. Could we move to the next slide? Could we move to the next slide, please? Okay, I'd like to turn to the next slide on key features of the RRF. And these are just a few remarks on some of the lessons or things that we're encountering in the implementation process, which maybe people, I think, maybe not have been fully internalized. So let me just talk about three aspects of the RRF which make it a unique instrument. But its uniqueness, it offers advantages of being able to move quick, hopefully being less bureaucratic. At the same time, it is a different way of doing business in terms of our interaction with regional authorities, with member states as regards EU funding. I'd like to comment on three aspects of this. The first aspect is the Recovery Resilience Facility is the first instrument we have at EU level which combines reforms and investments. Now, hitherto, we have pursued reform agendas through the European semester, and we have supported investment mainly through the cohesion funds, but we have been unable to combine them in one instrument. The fact that we can now do so in the Recovery and Resilience Facility offers potential to have, hopefully, a much more effective delivery process. And we can see this in some of the plans, also which are relevant for projects affecting where the implementing authority is at the regional level. So, for example, in the case of Italy, we have an important public procurement reform and competition reform. Now, these are designed to remove unnecessary impediments to investments. A lot of this actually concerns the delivery of local public services in areas like waste management, water, transport. And many of these plans, what we've tried to do is front load these reform agendas, the removing of these impediments to investments, so that there will be greater capacity to absorb the investments, both at regional and at national level. The second key feature, which is important of the Recovery Resilience Facility, is it's very, very different to the structural funds, where reimbursements take place on the basis of incurred costs. It's a contractual approach okay, where disbursements are only linked, only based upon the completion of milestones and targets, and these milestones and targets are performance-based. So the focus here is very much on outcomes. It's not on costs. So, for example, it's here mentioned I picked an example from Greece on the installation of renewable energy sources. Here, what you see is the target the target has been fixed by Q2 2023 and then up to 2025. And what you see, it is really up to Greece to ensure that this target is met. There's considerable scope and latitude for Greece to decide how it wants to achieve that target. But what we will be checking is whether this capacity has or has not been installed. If it's been achieved, we will disperse. The major change here is, and a part of with a move towards this contractual approach, it is a somewhat different approach to audit and control compared to what you have seen or encountered under the cohesion funds. There is also the need to consistently respect the do no significant harm principle. Now, the reason I'm stressing this is that it will take, and what we're seeing with Spain and Italy and other countries, which are among the first countries to request disbursements, it is a bit of a culture shock or a bit of a culture change compared to the approaches and procedures which were followed under the cohesion funds to move towards this more performance-based approach to delivery with its consequence for the control framework. So it will take some time to adapt to it. If I can close and put up my last slide, and then, sorry, that's a repeat. I must have doubled the slide. Could you go forward again? Yeah. So really just a couple of words some final words on implementation. And I really want to put the stress on implementation. So again, if there's one message I would like you to take away today is really for the plans which have been adopted and endorsed by the Council, we realize that you may not be fully satisfied with the process through which the plans were designed. But the key thing here is there is considerable latitude to influence the design and implementation of the investments during the implementation phase. And secondly, this is a time-limited instrument, okay? If the funding is not, if the investments are not completed and if the disbursements are not made by the end of 2026, the funding is lost according to the regulation. And there is no scope, there is no latitude or leeway to recover this. And many of the investments, particularly the investments which fall under the responsibility of regional authorities in areas like waste management, water, healthcare, these come with very, very long lags. So it is really critical that these investments start as soon as possible, and that whilst recognizing, say, some of the imperfections in the design phase of the plans, it's now important to proceed with implementation to avoid any risk of loss of funds later on. Now, some of the critical implementation risks we see, I've mentioned three. One is, of course, there is a risk, there are challenges in terms of administrative capacity, particularly in administrations which maybe lack the scale necessary for the additional funding, and also where this comes on top of large cohesion transfers. There are, of course, political risks. Now you will see for example, 5 member states, we're still in the process of assessing those. A lot of this is due to, let's say, the political cycle or political issues in the member state. But there is a risk in, if the political process leads to long delays, we would be concerned that may lead to problems in completing projects by the end of 2026. And the third implementation risk we see is we do see now that all member states are trying to build back better in the same area, particularly with the green and digital transition. We see resource constraints and supply side bottlenecks, particularly on the skill side, which is leading to higher pressure points. And we see that this is a potential implementation risk. My main message today is that the Commission very much wants to work with regional authorities. We're pushing member states to involve you as much as we can, but the critical issue now is to focus upon implementation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Costello. I really appreciate your comments, and especially the last slide about implementation and challenges ahead. Now it's time for Axel Beetse, diplomatic representative of Flanders in the European Union.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. I can start. Okay. When I started my posting as a representative of the Flemish government in The Hague some 7 years ago, 6 years ago perhaps, I was invited by the German ambassador to give some explanations on my role and position within the Belgian embassy. I told him the story, and afterwards he said, very interesting, but don't transmit your heretic position to the German lender, please. It's a joke to a certain extent. Nevertheless, it explains a bit the quite unique position Flanders is having, not only with its competences within the Belgian Federation, but also regarding foreign policy. The Belgian constitution has some, I would even say, confederal elements in it, in the sense that the Belgian foreign policy and also the Belgian European policy is the result of a compromise between the different regions and communities within Belgium, in the sense that every region and community, but in Flanders, everything has been merged into one set of institutions, is also fully responsible for the conduct of the foreign relations related to this set of internal competences we have. So this is quite a revolutionary concept, I think. And it's important also to understand why we were so closely active within, let's say, with the building up of the Belgian Recovery and Resilience Plan. Of course, not only Flanders, my colleague from the Brussels capital region is here. They also played the same role for their competences. Flanders has not only an impressive set of competences, but it is also having high ambitions. Yeah, you can give the other. Yeah, let's go on with the. Yeah, thank you. I will not go too far with this, but probably you are aware of that. One of the main goals we are having at this moment is to reach an employment rate goal of 80% of the adult population. We also have universities and world-renowned research centers. We are trying to further building up. Next, please. Even prior to, let's say, the building up of a Belgian national recovery and resilience plan, Flanders made up, the Flemish government made up its own recovery plan. In the beginning of September 2020, with a lot of ambitions based on our competences. And amongst the most important ambitions, always the same, the twin transition ambitions linked to the digital transformation and the greening of the economy and the society. Next, please. Okay, we can go to the next. This is about that internal Flemish plan. For Flanders, the European Union is the main, I would say, the main instrument for a foreign policy. So we have always been quite active, as we have also the quite unique position to be fully embedded within the Belgian Perm Rep. I am embedded within the Belgian Perm Rep. Officially, I'm seen as being a Belgian diplomat, but working in the first place, at least for Flanders. And I have a, let's say, a team of approximately 25 people working with me within, once again, the Belgian Perm Rep. Our own recovery and resilience plan formed the basis for the involvement of Flanders within the building up of the Belgian national plan. We were fully involved from the very beginning. I wouldn't say that everything went as smoothly as we would have liked it to be. We had some problems in the beginning with the fact that the European Commission and the Special Task Force were demanding one simple SPOC, one simple liaison officer for the whole of Belgium, that hindered to a certain extent our possibilities to enter into talks, informal talks with the European Commission and its task force. Nevertheless, with some difficulties, we were able to have that kind of discussion during the building up of the Belgian national plan on the way we had to, I would say, to embed our own goals, our own milestones, our own projects within a Belgian national plan. Next, please. And this involvement was personalized by the involvement of the Flemish Minister President, Jan Bon. You can see him here on the slide. The result is that quite a huge amount of the money that has been granted to Belgium within the framework of its national plan is in fact going directly to the government and the institutions of Flanders. You can see Belgium has been attributed almost 6 billion of euros, and approximately 40% of that is going to Flanders and will be used by the Flemish government to implement its part of its own recovery and resilience plan. Next, please. Well, you have some elements of that use of Flanders by Flanders of the National Belgium RRF. A lot of importance is given, of course, once again to the twin transformation, according also to the requirements made by the European Commission. Next, please. We have not only been able to build up the national recovery plan, we are also closely linked to the, I would say, the coordination, interfederal coordination and cooperation, but also to the monitoring of the Belgian national recovery and resilience plan. And that is also very important according to us. You have a set of possibilities, a set of tools by which Flanders and the other entities of the Belgian state will be implemented and are already being implemented into the monitoring of the implementation of the recovery plan. Next, please. Yeah. If I may, some lessons learned and some key messages on the basis of our experience. First of all, according to us, it is of the utmost importance for regions, whenever possible, to invest and to build up a well-developed European semester governance. As Flanders, we have been able since 2010, I think in the beginning at least, being the only region within the EU, to present to the European Union our own reform program with our own reform program. Of course, it was also always part of the Belgian presentation, but clearly made up a program on its own. We already also made use of the structural reform support program and the technical support instrument. Okay. Second lessons learned or key message, if I may, is, let's say, in fact, a message for the Commission. The Commission should be aware that taking into account the specificities of the member states is also a very positive thing for them. Not a one-size-fits-all approach, but a more tailor-made approach. And in that sense, regions can become a very important partner for the Commission regarding the implementation of the recovery plans and also in future of the European semester cycles. Next, please. Yeah. Given the importance, according to us, but also according to the Commission itself, I think that the Commission have to take into account that member states are given sufficient time to structurally involve regional authorities and other stakeholders in order to increase ownership of the projects and of the, I would say, narrow collaboration between the member states and the European Commission. That's all, folks. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Axel, for your interesting intervention. I know, for example, taking into account the specificities, spending reviews important, and so many reflections were very interesting. Now it's time to Lower Austria. Martin Eichtinger, State Minister of the Government of Lower Austria.
Hello from Lower Austria. Madam Minister, Director General, members of the Diplomatic Corps, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to join you today, even if only virtually from back home. I would like to thank the regions for EU Recovery Initiative for drawing attention to the importance of the involvement of regions in the EU Recovery Plan and for inviting me to share with you the Lower Austrian experience. The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has tested Europe's societies and economies in unprecedented ways. The public health emergency rapidly turned into one of the most traumatic crises in the history of the European Union. Soon it was clear that the economic recovery would require a joint effort at EU level, that we needed a Hamiltonian moment, as Minister Alsina said earlier. EU leaders therefore agreed on a comprehensive package of 1.8 billion euros, which combines the next long-term budget and the EU Recovery Plan Next Generation EU. As we discussed already earlier, the Recovery and Resilience Facility is the main pillar of the EU Recovery Plan. It provides financial support to EU member states to mitigate the social and economic consequences of the COVID-19 crisis. The funds dispersed to member states are linked to national recovery and resilience plans, which include reforms and public investment projects. For Austria, 3.5 billion euros are earmarked. At the annual EU budget conference, Commission President Ursula von der Leyen gave a strong reminder that with the EU budget and the next generation EU, we are transforming this continent for the decades ahead and help to create well-paid, sustainable jobs after the pandemic. Therefore, I have a very simple message for you today. Cooperation is key for a successful and sustainable implementation of Europe's recovery plan. The regulation establishing the Recovery and Resilience Facility contains the clearly expressed intention to involve cities and regions in national reconstruction plans. Their involvement in planning would ensure efficient use of resources in order to avoid dead weight and redundancy, especially in the European structural funds. Because the left hand must know what the right hand is doing. The European legislators have taken this decision because they realize that such major challenges require involvement by smaller and intermediate entities in line with the principle of subsidiarity. They realize that they cannot be managed by top-down state interventions alone. This, however, has all too often not been fulfilled by the very same people when drawing up the national recovery plans, often citing time and bureaucracy constraints. In only a minority of member states, governments have consulted the local and regional authorities in the preparation of national recovery and resilience plans. And even fewer member states have actually taken their input into account. While speed is of essence, one should not confuse speed and haste. A subtle equilibrium must be found between the need to act urgently and the need to carefully involve those who are responsible for the implementation of up to 70% of the EU acquis, namely local and regional governments. This is backed by the recent Eurobarometer survey, as we heard already earlier today, regarding the state of the EU, that shows that 77% of the participants think that regional and local authorities should have a better say on how to spend the next generation EU allocations. Without further ado, let me explain to you the experience of my region, Lower Austria. The Austrian federal government submitted the Austrian Recovery and Resilience Plan to the EU Commission in April. In the course of the preparation of the Austrian Recovery Plan, a consultation process took place within the framework of the preparation of the National Reform Program. The Austrian Federal Minister for Constitution and Europe held a series of consultation meetings with representatives of the regions, cities, municipalities, social partners, NGOs, youth organizations, and other relevant stakeholders of civil society back in February 2021. Lower Austria and many other involved stakeholders were given until the end of February 2021 to submit their proposals via a federal mailbox, which was set up specifically for the purpose. These Lower Austrian bundles of measures were developed by the staff of the relevant departments of the Office of the Lower Austrian State Government. In addition, the Conference of State Governors submitted proposals to the federal government. The Austrian Ministry of Finance, responsible for the preparation of the National Recovery and Resilience Plan, and this is really important, took all priority areas of Lower Austria into account. This includes the following areas: health, research and innovation, digitalization and digital services, education, competencies and jobs, energy efficiency and clean technologies, and smart mobility. Each priority area has the intention of creating new jobs and bringing more people into employment. In the interest of administrative efficiency and risk minimization, the Austrian federal government decided to make funds available primarily through proven funding channels to the broadest possible target group. The Austrian Recovery and Resilience Plan was officially approved on the 21st of June 2021 during a visit by European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen in Vienna. The Council approved the Austrian Recovery and Resilience Plan on the 13th of July of this year. And on September 28th, the Commission paid 450 million euros upfront to Austria, which equals 13% of the total support in order to kickstart the recovery. Let me summarize. The experience of Lower Austria in the design and implementation has been a fruitful one. It shows that the Austrian regional stakeholders were actively involved by the federal level. However, this was sadly not the case in all member states. Yet, a successful and sustainable European recovery needs the active involvement from the regional and local level from the start. Why is this so important? Because European regions are, as I said, responsible for implementing roughly 70% of European legislation. In many member states, regions have key competencies and legislative power to implement real transformational reforms. It is the European regional and local level that is closest to the citizens, their needs, demands, and visions for the future. A recent Eurobarometer survey shows that over 50% of the participants want to be more actively involved in decisions that affect their local surroundings. In Austria, the percentage even amounts to 80%. Of those who want to have a better say on the local level, 63% ask for a stronger citizens' participation. So let's actively involve the citizens. Let them have a say on the future of Europe and its priorities, and make them a true part of European governance. Let's get a feeling on how our citizens see the future of Europe. It strikes me as a crossroad where Next Generation EU meets the conference on the future of Europe. But briefly back to the Austrian experience. Concrete measures foresee an Austrian climate cabinet composed of members of the federal government and the state governments and chaired by the Austrian Chancellor and the Minister for Climate Protection. The federal government, as well as the state governments, take joint binding control measures in the event of deviations from the reduction path. A climate accountability mechanism between the federal government and the state governments with regard to measures and financial responsibility for compliance with the reduction path will be established. The task of a newly established future investment fund is to finance climate protection measures in Austria. It is the joint responsibility of the federal government and the state government. A mandatory and independent climate check for all new and existing laws, regulations, and agreements between the federal level and the states, as well as for the preparation of federal funding guidelines and investments, will be introduced by law. In the event of negative impacts on Austria's climate balance, an evaluation and an alternative assessment must be carried out. Ladies and gentlemen, digital and green transitions are at the heart of our future prosperity and the well-being of all Europeans. We must therefore use the massive investment of the EU recovery plan to reshape our economies wisely, speed up the green and digital transition, and make sure that the European citizens do not feel left behind. For this, we need the regions and the municipalities to serve as a multiplier of the EU added value. What has the EU done for me? We need to improve our EU communication on all levels and explain how European policies have impacted citizens' day-to-day life. Let's make it very clear that the EU added value is for each citizen. Funding for his or her small family-owned company, a new Wi-Fi hotspot in the municipality's main square, free Discover Interrail EU tickets for our young generation, abolishment of horrendous roaming fees within the member states. We believe that we as regions can be an important interlocutor between the federal and the municipal level and are willing and able to contribute with words and deeds to the implementation of the goals stipulated in the national recovery plans. We are experts in cohesion policy. We know where the pitfalls lie, and we are close to where the policies are being implemented. The benchmarking exercise has given you a clearer picture of the state of play on the ground, all in line with the tried and tested principles of multi-level governance and subsidiarity as stipulated in the regulation. To communicate all the small and bigger successes, We need each element of our multi-level governance in Europe, from the EU to the national level, but equally important, the regional and local level, which has direct connection to Europe's citizens. We know quite well what needs to be done in our municipalities, cities, and regions. Nevertheless, we need full commitment and a well-functioning multi-level governance structure that respects the Union's principle of subsidiarity. This means recognizing the equal legitimacy of each part of our Union, from the local and regional level to the federal and European level. Dear friends, let us work closely together and get this recovery on the road. Thank you so much.
Martin. May I say that a little bit jealous because you mentioned that a consultation process took place in your country, in Austria.
Thank you.
And
yes.
you also mentioned that it is important to involve those who are responsible to deal with the plans. I absolutely agree. Martin, I'm looking forward for your closing conclusion after the intervention of the South Tyrol and Catalonia representatives. Now it's time to Marta Gerber, Director of the Department Europe, please. South
Hello,
Tyrol.
hello. I thank you for the possibility to share with you the experience of our autonomous region, the region of Bolzano-Bozen, South Tyrol. Just a second. Here we are. We are a border region. We have a direct border to Austria and to Switzerland. We are in the very northern part of Italy. And I will share now with you the experience of South Tyrol in approaching the recovery fund. So let's start from the beginning, what has happened. In May 2020, there were the first talks about the generation, the next generation. And the government Conte adopted the first version of the PNRR. It's called PNRR in Italy. The last version of the PNRR was adopted by the European Commission in the end of April 2021. And after that, the PNRR was assessed by the European Commission and then evaluated in a positive way. This assessment confirms that Italy will be awarded funding over 191 billion euros. Of course, there are grants and loans. How is the national plan structured? The national plan foresees 6 missions. It is divided into these 6 strategic objectives, and they regard the digitalization, the innovation, competitiveness, culture, and tourism. Second, the green revolution and the ecological transition. Infrastructures aimed to support a sustainable mobility. We heard about it today. It regards also education and research, inclusion and cohesion, and the health sector. The final allocation of the funds should also reflect a thematic concentration around 3 strategic axes. Therefore, in the digitalization, there will be an investment of about 27% of the means, and the rest should go equally to the ecological transformation and for investments in the south. And of course, there is a certain stress, as we heard today, due to the narrow timeline that foresees that payments should be concluded within 2026. This is a very challenging objective for a state like Italy, with a more and more centralistic approach, but with a lack of administrative power and where there are a strong need for involvement of the regions in fulfilling all the duties that are required. Here is a glance at the operational organization. What you see above is the organization at the state level, and the bottom you see how we are structured in our autonomous province of Bolzano, South Tyrol. There is a board. The board gives political direction and general coordination, and it is composed of the president of the Council of Ministers, the ministers, and undersecretaries with responsibility for specific issues. Individual regional presidents or presidents of the Unified Conference can take part if involved in matters concerning them. The connection also in terms of information flows to the regions is guaranteed by the Minister of the Regions. The president of our autonomous province, Arno Compazzo, and the general director and the relevant departments have made a mirror board on regional level. And there is also a task force which is based in our Department for European Affairs. So we are a mirror of the cabin of Regia of the state on a regional level. What regards the permanent table, the tavolo permanente, there sits on a state level advisory and collaborative functionaries with within a steering committee. The members are the government, the regions, the local authorities, social partners, production categories. And the function is promotion of dialogue and the removal of obstacles to the implementation of the National Resilience Plan. What is the mirror situation at local level? We try to do at the same time an effective stakeholder involvement. Let's have a glance to the technical secretariat. It is a purely technical body in terms of its functions and compositions, and it is of support of the board and the permanent table. We have allocated the task force EU Next Generation in our province in the Department for European Affairs, as we consider it a super ERDF. Last but not least, there is a rationalization unit at the national level, and we have now at the local level our agency for public procurement, which is involved for a better implementation. What did we do as an autonomous province since the beginning? We have, as you may know, large primary competences in a long list of sectors of policies. Therefore, we ask in the beginning of all the exchanges regarding the PNRR, we are requesting that the resources allocated by the plan in sectors of primary competences are transferred on a pro rata basis so that autonomous bodies can manage them in accordance with the objectives and guidelines set out in the plan. And the request was concerned both the resources to be used for direct interventions and the resources to be transferred to other entities and subjects. It is therefore necessary to take into account the competences of the local authorities in the field of local finances, as well as, in general, the peculiarities of the individual territories, and therefore guarantee access to all national funding opportunities. What did we do so far? Immediately, 1 year ago, the autonomous province made the list of potential projects to be realized thanks to the possibilities of the plan. In accordance with the 6 missions I explained before, defined at the national level. This list of projects was transmitted to Rome last year. Unfortunately, the feedback was, until now, too much informal. We have only informal feedback, and it is really not yet clear if and how any of these projects will be financed within the plan. In a second moment, the government asked all regions to define a special project, the so-called Lighthouse Project, which would have strategic importance for each territory or regions. So our autonomous province immediately defined our Lighthouse Project regarding the digitalization of public administration. The follow-up at national level regarding the Lighthouse Project did not yet clearly define any official recognition or further information concerning the presentation mechanisms, the approval, the implementation procedure. All these things are missing so far. There is an article that says that there will be in any case a focal point PNRR state regions in order to give assistance to the regions in implementing their Lighthouse projects. In the last 3 weeks, there was another urgent request regarding the so-called 1,000 experts who are meant to help the regions in overcoming bottlenecks in administration in implementing the plan. These experts are sent by the government to every region. We, in the autonomous province of Bolzano, South Tyrol, are therefore expecting 19 experts. And within a few days, we had to decide in what strategic fields we would propose to put them, always in accordance with our territorial plans, which is also had to be settled within another week's time. So we decided for this breakdown. We would like to put these national experts in the digital infrastructure sector. We would like to have 8 ICT experts. We would like to put 2 experts in the environmental assessments and authorizations sector, having 2 environmental experts. We propose to have 5 experts in public procurement procedures, 2 experts, management experts, and 2 public accounting experts. So let me now summarize our difficulties encountered so far. We have a lack of political discourse, involvement of regional authorities, and participation in decision-making at national level. And there is a proliferation and a disalienation of decision-making actors at national level. There is also a lack of step-by-step information and a not exhausting information on various dedicated web pages. We noticed also a lack of sufficient reaction time and very narrow deadlines, example giving in providing the profiles of the 1,000 experts I talked about before, in hiring this expert, in creating all the single steps asked in very narrow times. We have coordination difficulties at national level. We have difficulties in accessing the correct contact points and sometimes also in reaching the contact persons. There is a disinformation at national level between ministries, example given concerning the Lighthouse projects. The right hand not always knows what the left hand is doing. And we have a very complex procedure. Now I see that a slide I could not show you because it switched over. So I went back This is the list of the local projects we transmitted to Rome, and they regard the sectors listed here. We would like to invest in the green revolution and in ecological change. We would like to invest also in digitalization, innovation, competitiveness, and economic activity. The next big sector with 6 projects proposed regards the social and territorial justice and gender equality. 2 projects in infrastructure for mobility, 1 in the health sector, and 1 in training, education, research, and culture. I come back to the last slide. What is needed? Autonomous regions need time and space for designing the interventions that fit best for the specific territory. The principle of subsidiarity is now overwhelmed by the urgent need of simplification of the procedures, and it has to be reintroduced in all procedures. It is difficult at the local level to combine too narrow national guidelines with autonomous needs and approaches. Therefore, we need more trust in regional authorities and in their potentials in implementing the Green Deal and what is needed in the resilience plan. We can do it. Let us do it on our way. The results will be brilliant. To do our work best, we need more flexibility, more concentration on regional strategies, more variety in Europe's administrations would translate better the regional approaches and put better forward a real EU next generation in administration too. I would like to say that we do it best when we can do it on our own. And I thank you for the possibility to share with you our experience from Bolzano, Bozen, South Tyrol, autonomous region in Italy. Thank you.
Thank you, Marta. Thank you, Marta. Vielen Dank. I think a very interesting contribution. 1, 2. Thank you for the summary as well. It's a very inspiring summary mentioning the problem you are facing too. It has been also very inspiring when you were talking about needs, mentioning subsidiarity, flexibility, simplification, and trusting regional authorities. We do agree with all these proposals. Now it's time to Matilda Villarreal, but let me say that Martin Heitinger, we will, after the intervention of Mrs. Villarreal from Catalonia, we will have the closing remarks by Martin Heitinger. So now it's time to Catalonia. Matilda Villarreal, Secretary of Economic Affairs and European Funds.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to join you today. Thank you for the opportunity to explain you some details about the implementation of next generation funds in Catalonia and in Spain. As the ministry said, in Catalonia, as a region of Europe, we truly believe in the power of regions. From our point of view, it's fundamental to empower these areas and support new economic policies that can help them to become more independent, efficient, and specialized as a part of a big engine called Europe. And now Europe needs to transform itself, its economy model, and its productive fabric into a more ecological, more digital, and more socially responsible model. The Next Generation Funds are a unique opportunity to do that, and the European Commission made available to the states an amount of funds without any precedents to achieve this transformation. So it is our responsibility to use them correctly. The Recovery, Transformation and Resilience Plan is Spain's proposal to receive these funds. And after being accepted by the European Commission, Spain is going to receive one of the biggest amount of funds among the other states. Spain's proposal is a good plan on paper, but as it was created unilaterally by the Spanish government without any consultation to regional governments, the plan is too general and do not enable each region to perform correctly in what they are best in. This might lead to inefficient use of the received funds or even to a potential mismanagement. The plan designed by the Spanish government does not take into account the particularities and potential of the different regions and leaves the regional governments, as is the case of the government of Catalonia, in the role of mere executors of the plan without any decision-making capacity. Let me explain the figures and how these are distributed according to the Spanish plan. I had the presentation, I sent the presentation here. Okay, thank you very much. As you can see in the slide, the economic funds given to Spain for the recovery and resilience mechanism are up to 140,000 million euros. This amount is split in two equal parts, one dedicated to subsidies and the other to loans. So far, we only have information on the subsidy part, which is planned to be distributed over 6 years. The allocation of the 140,000 million euros is distributed annually, 24,000 million euros for 2021, 25,000 million euros during 2022, 19,000 million euros during 2023, and the rest between 2024 and 2026. If we focus on the 2021 allocation, the Spanish government has decided that of the 24,000 million euros, it will cede 10,000 million to be distributed among the Spanish regions, and the rest remains in the central government to provide direct aids and grants. To be honest, we are not seeing any major innovative programs in the application of the RRM funds. The state is just giving the resources to already established instruments to minimize risks. In terms of RRM funds distribution by areas, state agencies and ministries concentrate most of the resources affecting the productive sectors, while management of energy transition and social programs such as education, care economy, and building rehabilitation are delegated to the regions. Regarding to the funds allocated to the regions, the state makes transfers to the regional government through sectoral conferences chaired by each state ministry, according to its area of competence. The problem is that these meetings are unidirectional. The state communicates the distribution criteria, the amounts of each region for each region, and the programs to be promoted. These programs are the same for all the regions. The regional governments cannot modify or adapt them to their specific characteristics, and in some cases, they even interfere in competencies that have been totally transferred to the region. In the case of Catalonia, which accounts for 19% of Spanish GDP, has been allocated 1,400 million in 2021. It means that the government of Catalonia will only be able to distribute 5.9% of the whole funds granted for 2021. These allocations have been made as of July 2021, and they have been accelerated in the last quarter of this year. It makes extremely difficult to the regions to launch any calls and absorb the maximum amount of funds within the established period. And as I said, I've already pointed out, these calls are designed under a centralist criteria without taking into account the particularities and competencies of the regions that make up the Spanish state. For all these reasons, we in Catalonia are calling for a more active role of the regions in the co-governance decision-making capacity in terms of establishing priorities and criteria, and participation in the design of the regional calls. On the other hand, regions should be able to support their own unique projects based on the capabilities of their knowledge and productive systems. And finally, greater planning and transparency on the part of the state in the programs to be promoted so that the regions have an anticipatory capacity. In conclusion, in our opinion, the role of the region is key to achieve the correct deployment of the recovery and resilience plan, and thus obtain the maximum absorption of next generation funds. So let the regions participate in the deployment of the funds. We can do it, we want to do it, and let's do it. Thank you for your attention.
Gracias, Matilda. Thank you very much. Your final phrase was, let the regions participate. That's all. Because you talk about the plan, the Spanish plan was unilaterally presented. Regions cannot modify the plans. There was no consultation at all. So a very different situation from the one we have seen in other regions. Now, I'm asking, we ask Martin Eichinger to go on with the closing conclusions.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Minister, Director General, members of the Diplomatic Corps, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for your valuable contributions today. As previously mentioned, cooperation is key. The same applies for the sharing of knowledge and experience. Therefore, it was important today to hear how different regions experienced the involvement in the design and implementation of the EU recovery strategy. Austrian regions were actively involved in shaping the Austrian Recovery and Resilience Plan, and their input was fully taken into account. We also heard from Flanders how they played a significant role in shaping the Belgian Recovery and Resilience Plan and how it developed its own reform program. When designing the plan, Belgian authorities consulted national and regional social partners and stakeholders. However, the situation is very different in Italy, where the regions were not as much involved as they thought they should have been. South Tyrol stressed the importance for autonomous regions to have more time and space for designing the interventions that fit best for the specific territory. South Tyrol mentioned the difficulty that arises when combining narrow national guidelines with autonomous needs and approaches. As we heard in Spain, the relationship between the federal and regional level was put to a test. The design and management of the National Recovery and Resilience Plan was very centralized, even though the regions have the competencies to implement transformational projects and carry out structural reforms. We are all aware that Next Generation EU is a very unique opportunity, but it became very clear that regions need to be better included in the governance, decision-making process and implementation of the resilience and recovery strategy. Let us not forget, many European regions do have key competencies and powers to implement real transformational reforms. However, the implementation varies a lot across member states. And as we have heard, in some cases, it is extremely centralized without the active involvement of regional stakeholders. Ladies and gentlemen, this initiative, Regions for EU Recovery, is so important. It channels the concerns of many regions in the EU who want to have a bigger say and play an active role in the EU recovery strategy. We should also keep the follow-up of the national recovery and resilience plans in mind. All reforms and investments have to be implemented within a tight time frame. as the regulation on the recovery and resilience facility stipulates that they have to be completed by August 2026. The Commission should have offered, as the representatives of Flanders and South Tyrol also stated, sufficient time to the member states in order for all of them to structurally involve regional and local authorities and thus create ownership. Therefore, clear guidance from the EU Commission is necessary on the process of the pan-European implementation of the RRF. While there is a need for economic surveillance and policy coordination, reporting should focus on the essential elements and strategic links with the European semester. Here, it will be vital for member states to keep consulting and coordinating with all involved parties and use existing regional competencies and skills. Let us also not forget about the principle of subsidiarity, which should be applied in all procedures. We can all agree that we need more trust, more flexibility, more concentration on regional strategies. More flexibility in Europe's administrations would translate better the regional approaches and put forward a real EU next generation in administration too. Nevertheless, all the national recovery and resilience plans send a clear message. Europeans are ready for a new start. Our citizens are ready to embrace a more sustainable, more digital and more resilient future. Therefore, we ask the Commission to stand by the national and regional level every step of the way to ensure that the EU recovery strategy will be a European success. Once again, thank you to the regions for the EU Recovery Initiative for highlighting this important topic and for giving the regions a common voice in this journey for a joint EU recovery process. We will continue to cooperate and join forces whenever necessary and make sure the regional voices matter in Europe. Thank you very much for your attention.
Vielen Dank. Thank you, Martin. Wherever they are, the different situations we have seen today, you say that the need to be more involved, need the regions to be more involved in the decision-making process and on the implementation of the different programs. Thank you, Martin, for your closing remarks. And to finish, let me say thank you to all, Axel, thank you, Martin, Marta, Matilda, thank you, Declan Costello from the Commission. Thank you, our ministers as well. Thank you all, all the speakers, for your contributions. I just want to add that that is not an end, but see you soon. In fact, all we have already received the call for a meeting, a new meeting, to be held on next 17, in which, among other topics, we are going to analyze the feedback of today's meeting. So thanks again, and see you soon.